Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us to our presentation today about building compliance training and discussing partnering tips between the training and compliance teams. Before we start, let me just go over a couple housekeeping items. So this session should be lasting us about an hour, depending on number of questions and answers. We are recording it, and so the recording and all the materials will be made available to everyone after the presentation, probably within the next day or so. Also, we have gotten the presentation certified through HRCI for 1 hour of strategic HR credit. So for those of you who are SPHR or PHR and need continuing education, please contact us after the webinar to get your certificate for today's presentation. Let's see, lastly, you'll see on the right-hand side of your computer a little chat box. Go ahead and use the chat box to type in questions, or actually, no, you've got the questions panel, so go ahead and use that to type in questions at any time through the presentation, and Jane and I will answer those questions through the presentation and certainly at the end. So with that said, let me kind of get started and introduce myself. I am Janine Yancey, and I am the founder and president of mTrain. And mTrain actually delivers online compliance training. I found myself in this niche because my background is actually as a compliance professional. I'm a labor and employment lawyer of 20 years. And back, I would say, in the mid-1990s, I was in the Bay Area doing a whole lot of stand-up compliance training to managers and employees about harassment and discrimination and hiring and terminations and all those lovely HR compliance topics. And as I'm sure many of you will remember, we had the .com craze in the Bay Area, and it kind of the bug bit me, and I decided that there was a better way to do things than just stand-up training, and that was the impetus for me to start mTrain. So for our discussion today, I'll be bringing kind of the compliance perspective, if you will, and kind of what compliance professionals, how they look at it. But certainly I kind of straddle the wall, and you know, I can see it from both sides. I see the trainer's perspective as well as the compliance perspective. But I've invited Jane Bozarth to join me today so that she can present fully the trainer's perspective. And Jane is quite active in the training community, so her kind of formal job, if you will, is Director of eLearning for the state of North Carolina, which means that all those state agencies and departments that need training come to Jean and her team for help. But in addition to that, she's a very prolific blogger, writer, speaker. So she's written several books, the most current of which is Social Media for Trainers. And she writes a monthly column for Learning Solutions magazine. And I'll also add that Jane, I think, was one of our first, one of mTrain's first e-learning clients for the state of North Carolina. So, Jane, thank you so much for joining us today. I totally appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be asked.
All right, cool. And so, Jane, we are looking to you to give us the training person's perspective in all of this. I think our goal today is to kind of flesh out the issues between like how compliance folks look at it and how training folks look at it. And I guess this is, you know, more geared towards the trainers and what trainers can do kind of proactively to kind of build that bridge, if you will, as we have in the slide here, to create a partnership. So to start off with, we'll kind of survey maybe typical challenges between the two teams, talk about some strategies you can use, which would include how to tell a compliance story, and then answer some Q&A. So Melissa is helping us out today, and we thought we would kind of start off our discussion with a couple polling questions just to see where people's pain points are, where their experience is, and that will help us kind of tailor our comments accordingly. So Melissa, if you would, can you launch the polling questions?
Okay, here's the first one.
All right, great. And so just, have you developed compliance e-learning before? Is one of the first questions.
I'll give about a few seconds or so.
Okay. So while we're waiting, Jane, is it nice where you are today?
It is a beautiful spring day. We finally have spring, and I have a convertible.
Oh,
and after we're through here, I might have to come up with a half-baked excuse to run some errand or other.
Well, so, yeah. In sunny California, it's actually raining up in Northern California.
Oh, no. Well, we're right between now the advent of spring and what is going to be the pollen season. So we get like a really small window before the pollen sets in and no one can breathe for 3 weeks. So we end up with gorgeous azaleas and stuff, but our pine trees let us have it and the flowers this time of year. But.
Boy. Okay, so, and then Melissa, so are we looking at the results for just the first question or are these all three?
Just for the first one, so that's
okay. So question, it looks like we're about half and half of developed compliance e-learning before. Second question, how often does your organization rely on outside vendors for that compliance learning?
And I'll probably give about 30 seconds for that.
Okay.
And I would say while we're waiting that when I think of compliance, I also think of things that might be called awareness. They might not be compliant topics, they might not be mandated or required, but someone somewhere, often HR, wants people to know we have a dress code or an internet use or some kind of, or ethics practices or something. It may not be what we would call OSHA compliance or mandated or safety or that kind of thing, legal compliance, but it's something that they would call that. Also, I am housed in HR. I've been in HR for over 10 years, one way or another, so I deal with this all the time as a trainer person.
So, Jen, I look at it as anything that an organization has a policy on would be compliant.
Yep.
So it looks like we're kind of split. So about 30% say rarely, 30% say sometimes, 30% say very often. Last question, what is your biggest challenge? And then did we have some options out there for them? Oh.
Yeah, we have about 5.
All right. We have lots of options. So, and this, I think, probably helps us the most. If you guys can tell us what the biggest challenge is in working with the compliance team. And for those folks on the call today that are actually compliance professionals, this might kind of give you inside view of how your training colleagues are looking at the situation. So
and I would also likewise add here that it doesn't have to be compliance either. Anytime I work with a subject matter expert, I often find I run into many of these same issues, regardless of the topic.
Oh, good point, Jane. Thank you. Yeah. So I think it looks like, and this is kind of what I thought, but I think this is very helpful. So Jane, do you see this? So, you know, 55% are saying difficulty streamlining content, 50% saying lack of clear learning objectives. And I think that those are certainly, in my experience, working with different customers and compliance professionals, that's certainly what I see. Jane, do you have any kind of comments on that?
I was going to say it's funny that desire to upload a PowerPoint came out so low because that's probably the single biggest one I have. I have an issue I'm working on right now where the SME keeps sending me gorgeous PowerPoints. They keep refining. There's 83 of them and I don't want one. So it's funny that other people don't seem to be having that. It's a big struggle where I am. So.
Well, I think that to me, I look at that as a good sign because I think that shows a little bit of evolution in the compliance folks understanding, hey, we got to do something a little bit more than the PowerPoint. But some of these other things are still challenges. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate that. I think I need to click in. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about typical partner challenges. So Jane, feel free to jump in and comment, but I just put this out, and let me just kind of explain the context. So, you know, M-Train is frequently, obviously, working with a lot of different companies. I think we've got 1,500 or even a little bit more than that companies actively right now doing training projects, you know, with M-Train compliance content, you know, e-learning content. And typically we will be connecting or communicating with the HR person or the compliance professional or the legal team. Sometimes we're connecting with the training team as well, but I would say the majority is probably the compliance team. And so for those situations, a lot of times if they have something else or something out of the box or something that's completely specific to their organization, they will come to us and ask us to do it for them. And a lot of times that doesn't really make sense. It's cost prohibitive for us to do it, and it's not a win-win situation. And in those occurrences, we will often ask about their training team and try to loop in the training professionals to help address that problem. And so when those situations and conversations have occurred, these are kind of some of the responses we've heard. So big, international training, staffing firm rather, wanted a customized standards of conduct course, and they have it currently as a PowerPoint that they're doing. They wanted it all online, but they needed like 15 different versions. And so, we naturally said, you've got some training folks on hand. We can help your training folks do this, but they should be doing it. And the response was, hey, training doesn't understand the legal issues, so it's difficult working with them. Here's a tech company. Compliance is for legal purposes, so it's just safer just to farm it out. And there's certainly, some merit to that argument, but, really only, I think, for maybe 1 or 2 courses, not for a whole bunch of courses. Here's a retail firm. Training can't think of any case studies or examples, so what help are they to us? Here's an accounting firm who thought, hey, that training department, they're only there for the soft skills, they don't deal with the compliance. And then here was the most recent example, an oil and gas company where they just, I don't even think they even knew anyone in the training department. I mean, it was so separated that there was just no relationship. So certainly if folks have other kind of challenges or thoughts that they've experienced, please kind of chat that in. We'd like to hear them. But those were some of the things that we've encountered over the years. And that seems like there's a huge opportunity for growth and a tighter relationship between the training and the compliance teams. And that kind of dovetails into the next point, which is, the amount of money that's being spent on training these days is growing, and this is an ASTD stat from 2011. So currently we've got companies spending or organizations spending about $156 billion on employee learning. Let's see, where was it? And then, along with that, ASTD, as well as I believe it was Burson and Associates, said out of that, typically companies, and this is a 2011 stat, spend between $800 and $1,000 per employee, and 56% of that is spent internally, so on costs internally as well as staff payroll, but then 30% is spent externally. So if you look at that, 30% of $1,000 is $300. And I think we all know that compliance training is up there. It's usually, either number 1 or number 2 in terms of the frequency of the training topic. So, no matter what, organizations are usually doing their compliance training. So that's, the way I look at it is that's, a good chunk of that $300 your organizations are spending on outside vendors like M-Train, which is super, but a lot of that money could be brought back into the organization for the training department, and training teams can be handled. So, Jane, why don't you kind of tell us about some of the typical trainer frustrations?
Okay, I'll talk about that, and I would invite folks to type in chat. If you can send messages to us, and I'll read them back if you have anything to add to this conversation. I also need to tell Dawn that I see the message from her, but I can't respond privately to her in this environment, but I do see it and acknowledge that message. I'm not sure what event she's referring to, but I'm interested to hear more about that. And talking about what trainers run into in dealing with compliance training, and I think in working with SMEs in general, specifically with compliance training, we wonder why when we have training departments in place, when we have instructional designers and learning experts in place, why the people in the organization would choose to go to the outside. And can I drive these slides, or is Melissa driving them? Because we've got some pop-ups here.
I'm driving them.
Okay. So wondering why they go outside the organization, why they're looking for the outside vendors rather than coming to us.
You want me to hear this, Jane? Let me.
And as I said, I've run into the problem of people handing me the PowerPoint, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but one of the problems with e-learning in general that we've seen in 10 years is that we can see someone teaching a perfectly good classroom-based program that is engaging and interesting. Maybe they've got really a dynamic presenter. Maybe that presenter has a lot of good war stories. Maybe there's something compelling. But what happens when we go to turn that into an e-learning program is we want to convert it rather than transform it. And what happens is all of the interesting, engaging stuff and the exercises and the simulations and the good presenter qualities fall out of it, and we end up shoveling slides online, and we want to get away from that. We don't want that to happen. We want to capture the things that are more dynamic about the program, that are more interesting, and not just get caught up with dealing with the static, flat, content-based stuff. We do, I think, run into a lot, I'm sure others empathize with this, a lot of belief that presenting is training, that telling is training, that talking is training. We work with folks whose memory of school and whose understanding of how they learn is from sitting in a chair listening to someone talk at them. That's not really how they learned, but that's how they remember school looking. So we run into problems with them believing that if we just tell people things, then they will magically apply them or be able to learn them. So they don't really understand about learning methods, about how the design process works, about how intentional that can be. Anything else on this one? I think there's something else coming up.
Let's see, I think we did.
This is my favorite. I call this the filibuster. Where you have all of this content. Well, I saw the slides. It's gone. You see somebody with all of this text and all of this information, and they just want to sort of present it, read it, tell it, narrate it, have folks read over it, and it's really just legalese. It's just too much information. It's not very applicable to the learner and their real world and what they need to do to act within the guidelines, to act within legal requirements, to act in a safe manner, to keep people from getting hurt, to keep everybody from getting fired. So, you know, I do think of it as the filibuster when I see the page after page of legal text or compliance text or policy stuff. And what was the next one? These are stacked on my handout, so I can't see.
Oh, sorry, Jane. So
okay.
Can I just jump in on this one? I do think that, like, from the compliance person's perspective, they are just so worried about the record and showing a record of the training, just so you have an understanding of what's going on. They just need all those words to be on the screen so that when some judge or lawyer is looking at the training, they can check off what it is. So that's just wanted to kind of give you that idea.
And I, you know, unfortunately, that does seem to hold up in court. You know, I was involved once in a case where the organization prevailed because we had a piece of paper with the employee's signature on it. I question whether they learned it. It worries me that given the time and effort, and as we saw from the previous slide, the money that goes into developing some of this training, it worries me that our goal is just to say somebody looked at it. We could be doing so much more. We could be getting actual compliance. We could be getting actual better performance, but we're satisfied just to present it or have them read it. So it seems like we could do better than that without a whole lot of additional effort. And they really have no idea what's involved. I live in two interesting worlds. I'm enough of a geek that I understand technology stuff and I can talk with IT and have them not laugh at me. But, you know, sometimes people come to me wanting something, and it may be a 2-minute task. It may be nothing for me to crank it out or fix this image or make some change that they want to a page. But sometimes they come to me, and what they're asking for is weeks of work. They don't know how to differentiate those things, and they're incredulous when I say, do you have any idea how long this will take? Or they think it's magic when I can do it quickly. So, you know, having a better, I think, understanding of what's involved on both sides and being able to communicate more clearly and understanding and appreciating the effort that goes into what you're asking for is a real challenge. But they really don't know what's involved in developing good training and doing more than just taking 60 PowerPoint slides and converting them so that they'll run in HTML5, right?
Yeah, no, I hear you. And then I just want to kind of point out that the whole trainer frustrations concept is courtesy of Trina Ribber. I sat in on a presentation she did a couple weeks ago that through the eLearning Guild that was also a just nice, tight kind of summary of kind of some of the same things we're talking about here in terms of trainer frustrations versus the compliance person's frustrations. So that might be an additional resource for folks too.
Right, and one last thing I'll say, and Janine and I have talked about this at some length. I think maybe the biggest challenge I run into from my perspective of trying to do my job well and trying to work with these topics, subject matter experts want everyone else to be a subject matter expert. They want us all to operate at that level. They want us all to have that level of knowledge and understanding, but the truth is most of us don't need most of that to get through our day. We need to know what I call the critical 20%, what will keep us out of trouble, what will keep us safe, what will help our employees succeed, that kind of thing. The subject matter expert tends to go into what I call the 80%. They want to talk about something odd that happened on a Tuesday in 2008 and how they fixed it. They talk about the exceptions, they talk about the outliers, and they have a very hard time getting focused on what we really have to do our jobs well. They don't get very clear on performance goals, on what the workplace reality is. And when I mention subject matter experts, I need to be fair. We are all subject matter experts for somebody. Right. So I don't mean to be talking about them with a capital T. I mean, we all can look at somebody who doesn't know about training, and we want them to know everything about instructional design, but the truth is that's what we're here for. So we need to help them pare it down and get focused. And I see that I have a question from Felicia in the chat. You know, that's one of the ways we can make it engaging, is to pare it down to 6 or 7 really critical work tasks or skills and figure out how we can develop realistic practice and exercises around that, not this 80% of everything legal that was ever written about a topic. That's where we can start. But it's a challenge. It's hard for the trainer. It's hard for the SME to get to the point of understanding what that learner really needs to know versus what the SME is paid to know, right?
Yeah, and then Felicia, I'd ask just a little patience because I think we're going to talk about. And I mean, the quick hit right now is it's a compromise because, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but there are basically 2 strategic objectives that are in play on any compliance course. There's the basically the legal issue, the audit proof, and you want it for the record. So the legal, ROI versus learning objectives, and they're very different. But we'll talk about it a little bit, and so just bear with us a little bit. So typical compliance frustration. So Jane, you could jump in, but let me just kind of tell you what I've heard, and certainly my own experience. So as I said, I'm a lawyer of 20 some odd years. So I just kind of stop it after 20 because time is passing. But when I first started doing M-Train, I had the benefit of working with a couple of very talented instructional designers, and it was a difficult learning process for me because, like I said, I've got a different objective. I'm worried about litigation and claims and what a lawyer is going to say and what a judge is going to say. That's my focus, and it's very different than the trainer. And I think it's helpful for trainers to understand that. So here's some typical frustrations from the compliance folks. This trainer doesn't understand the material. They have no idea about this. So how can they help me? So such little understanding that the compliance person is kind of overwhelmed to begin with because they feel like, oh gosh, I got to go teach this person this stuff. And I put this in there. Jane kind of laughed when I put it in there, but I got to tell you, and maybe it says something more about me, but I don't think so. Any of your compliance folks are thinking, okay, how sharp is this person? They need to be working with sharp people, and so there's a strategy to address that, but you need to understand that that's going through their head. I presented this workshop for years, so they, so my own background, and I could tell you, 90% of compliance professionals are probably in a similar boat. They have their workshops on whatever topic is their expertise, and they've been doing it time and time again. They get, good experiences, good results, people, clapping at the end of their workshop, good surveys. So they think they have it down, and you need to kind of understand that and work with that. This is what I alluded to. Hey, the objective of this is for the courts. It's not to be pretty. I was just talking to somebody, a trainer, at the end of January at ASTD Tech, and she was saying that this happened to her where she was doing a project for a legal department, and by accident she was trying to pare it down. She cut out a big legal element. She lost all credibility. I mean, she said from then on that project was very difficult. So that's something to work out. And yes, so Jane, good comment. The popular presenter is not necessarily the effective trainer. So some strategies for us to look at here. I think we're putting down 5 strategies for folks to think about. 1, establish credibility and start explaining from the get-go the value of instructional design. Manage expectations. Leverage the results of past workshops. Understand the subject matter, and then tell a compliance story. So let's kind of go into each of these, but here's 5 strategies for you. So establish credibility, and Jane, I'm gonna kind of turn this over to you to tell us kind of what you've done.
Well, I think first of all, you want to start in a place where you can talk about why they should listen to you. You need to talk about why the training could be more effective, how the training could be better received, how we could get better performance in the workplace. One of the challenges we have with a lot of these kind of presentations is that they are based on knowledge objectives and not performance objectives. And the truth is, my boss has never ever stopped me and asked me to list, describe, or define anything. That's not really what we do in the real world. So talking with people about what the best result in the workplace could be, what kind of performance we're going after, not just checking off the awareness, asking them what kind of problems people run into when they're back at work, asking them what kind of real cases they've dealt with, and moving toward ways of helping to establish that you can support that learning in the workplace, I think is important in the setup of this conversation. We see people all the time who leave training, quote unquote, and they still get in trouble, or people still make mistakes, and we tend to want to blame the learner. Well, they went to class and they're still doing it wrong. Well, they signed the policy. But looking for ways we can actually keep them out of trouble, finding application and context, talking about how people actually learn versus what they can actually, sit and listen to. The same thing we were talking about earlier about trying to capture what was effective in that live class, which often is exercises or real-world examples that maybe we could redefine as cases, as scenarios, as what would you do problems, as that kind of thing. But the thing is, again, I think folks misunderstand what learning is, and they assume that it's just acquisition of knowledge. Most of you at gunpoint could probably tell me what the quadratic equation is. But whether that's been useful for you in your adult life, I don't know. But one of the things we want to look at is sort of a cognitive theory of learning. It's from the cognitive school anyway, where we talk about the fact that the most human beings, according to most of the literature, if you're a subscriber to the cognitive theories, have 2 processing channels. We take things in through our ears, we take things in through our eyes, we hear things, we see things. And we have limited capacity in both of those channels. Sometimes information competes, which you have run into when you've had somebody reading slides to you. We read at a different speed than that at which we hear, and it causes confusion, and you don't learn anything at all. But we also have what's known as working memory, and our goal as trainers is to try to move what's in working memory and in front of us into long-term memory. But let's do a little activity really quickly. I don't want you to pick up a pencil. Promise me. I want you to do this in your head. I'm going to put a math problem in chat, and you can answer me. And I want you, in your heads, without pencil and paper, just in your heads, what's the answer to this problem?
All right. So that's good.
Have we got answers coming in?
People are busy writing it down, Jane.
All right, we've got some coming in. All right. So your working memory can handle this task. You can do this in your head. You can do it without a pencil. How about this problem? Here is exactly the same problem, but with more factors.
Oh, I can't do that.
All right. This is the difference between what the working memory can hold and work with and what not. And basically what we're looking at is the difference between 2 critical points and 19 slides of legalese.
Oh, well, can I just stop you for a second, Jane?
Yep.
I love that, because
Yep.
I was going to comment on strategies from the compliance person's perspective on how a trainer can get the compliance person to sit and listen and be receptive. And my thought is, you know, your talking points about cognitive learning, and we receive the information, you know, visually and through auditory senses and working memory versus long-term memory. That all that is great, because you could have a couple of little sound bites telling the compliance professional about that, and all of a sudden they're going to stop in their tracks and say, oh, this is like a whole field that I don't really know about.
Right.
And so that's from my perspective, that's what trainers need to achieve really in the 20 minutes.
Quickly. You need to get that set up really quickly. But the deal, we tend to, and this is true of a lot of training, we tend to ask people to attend to way too much, and we have a really hard time, as do the subject matter experts, differentiating between what someone needs to really know and what they just need to be able to find, which may just be a job aid. It may be guidelines for what to do if an employee walks in and says she needs an accommodation, or says she needs family medical leave, or is requesting something. You don't necessarily need to do all that from memory, but the subject matter expert can. And so they tend to think that everybody should be able to do it too. So our goal as trainers is to help move this information from the short-term working memory back to long-term, while recognizing that we have limits, that we can only expect people to take in and apply so much at a time. So, you know, if you overload the working memory, you're going to lose the information. And so showing folks that sometimes we are shooting ourselves in the foot with so much information, I think can be very useful. And I think the math problem illustrates it really well.
So, Jane, can I ask you, have you done that to one of your...
Have I done what?
Just done this math problem. Like, my thinking is,
yeah,
I would love to see a trainer start their partnership or project with the compliance person, talk about cognitive learning theories, you know, not overload them with detail, but just, you know, enough to show the lawyer, the trainer, or the compliance person, rather, that, you know, there's stuff that they don't know about, and then just, you know, do this little math problem. Just say, let me show you a little example here.
I use the math problem all the time. And I find, you know, another analogy that you've used that I think works real well, we're talking about moving something from the screen into the hard drive.
Right,
and
exactly.
You can't just shove everything into the hard drive. You know, people need to encode the information, they need to work with it, and it needs to be realistic. But yeah, we have to help the subject matter expert understand we can help them. I will say all of this still goes back to getting really clear on what the on-the-job performance is. It's not just knowing a bunch of laws from a bunch of slides. You know, figuring out what the performance is and helping get there is important. You know, one thing that's not on the slide, though, that helps, I think, with credibility is have your act together. You know what you're talking about enough that you don't sound like an idiot. You don't need to be quoting medical terminology. And I think we're going to talk about this more later. The other thing is thank people. I am a subject matter expert, too, for a lot of folks, and I can't tell you the number of times somebody's asked me for something that took up a piece of my time or required me some work to find for them, and they don't even acknowledge it. You know, thank the subject matter expert, build some rapport, try to have a good relationship, and that will pay off later for you.
But so, Jane, and I just want to point out to folks on the call that, you know, I think Jane is in a slightly different situation than many trainers, because since she's in a government organization, they don't have the luxury and discretion to spend that 30% of their budget in outside vendors like private organizations do, like the private sector. So Jane is actually probably more in the situation than most trainers, having to partner with compliance professionals. So I just kind of want to put that out there.
Yeah, true. That's true.
So here's the next strategy, manage expectations. So Jane, you had commented about, you know, somebody thinks that you do something, a little job aid or a little e-learning course, and it's like magic. It just appears the next day. And certainly I know from our experiences at MTrain, whenever we're doing a custom project for a company, when our point of contact is the compliance folks, they have no idea what's involved. And so we need to, you know, kind of focus on that and let them know what's involved. So again, these are stats from an eLearning Guild report back in 2002. So, you know, simple 1 hour of e-learning is 117 hours. Average, so average would be there's some text, there's some graphics, there's some animation, is 191 hours. complicated is they have 276 hours. I frankly, I think that that's even conservative. I mean, certainly with our courses, it's a whole lot more than 276 hours, but then we're also shooting video and casting actors and writing, a lot of dialogue and stuff like that. But, I think starting any project and just kind of, charting out the scope of work and what's involved so that they kind of understand at the get-go that this is not going to be, 1, 2, 3, and here you go the next day, I think helps quite a bit. Jane, any comments on that?
No, I thought you were doing fine.
All right. Okay, so then here, and this is really, I think, probably more useful little tidbits for trainers, really than to kind of share with compliance folks. So professional video is typically $1,000 to $2,000 per minute of finished video. So that would include kind of writing the dialogue, shooting the video, and post-production. Royalty-free photos, from Shutterstock or Getty or iStock is, some money too, depending on the photo. And then, so professional voiceover, $65 per minute. We could get lower or higher. One thing that I've seen companies do that really is kind of like nails on a chalkboard for me is the narration. So I've seen a lot of folks just do somebody in-house as the narrator. And sometimes people have a really good voice, but this is, to me, this is a relatively minimal cost, and for you get huge bang for your buck if you just spend a little bit of money on a professional voice, professionally trained voice. Makes a lot of difference. But that's just my pet peeve.
I was typing this in chat while you were talking, but I've read several articles in which they talk about people, because of our phones now, that people are tolerant of video that's imperfect. They don't mind a little shake or a little graininess, but they really want the audio to be good. And good voice talent is not hard to find. We frequently outsource that, and it's not horribly expensive. You need to be really clear about what you want, have the script done. But we use an online voice company, and I think it's $50 for most of the jobs we do. We don't do big jobs, but we get a really nice professional actor, and it really pumps up the level of quality. And I'll say what I said before. You need to know what you're asking for from them. You need to help educate them about what this takes. I think people are shocked when they hear the amount of time that goes into even a simple simulation. I did a tutorial the other day for my new book. It's 1 minute and 47 seconds long. It took me 22 takes.
Yeah.
And it's something I do all the time. I mean, people just don't know how long development time can be, and helping them understand that Angry Birds is great, or Plants vs. Zombies is great, and it was in development for 3 years. So, things take a while.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. So, it might help, actually, if you want to even do the chat of the online voice vendor you use, because I think that's a great resource. And does your vendor shoot you just the MP3 files?
Yep.
Just the audio files?
They send me finished files, but I send them exactly what I want. We don't do rework. What I send them is ready. It's done.
Yeah.
So
it's easy.
Yeah.
Okay, so next strategy. So, the first one was establish your credibility. Second one is manage the person's expectations. Third one is leverage the past workshop. So, Jane had put in a comment into the chat that even if somebody's a good presenter, doesn't mean that they're, necessarily a good trainer. And that's certainly true, because it's a one-way dialogue here. But having said that, I think that there's a lot of golden nuggets that trainers can, get from the good parts of a good workshop, good presentation. So, for example, is it a story that they're telling that everyone kind of sits up and takes notice of, or they enjoy listening to? Is it, some kind of a learner exercise that presenter is having them do? Whatever it is, during their workshop, find out, like the highlights. I mean, I would think typically folks know what the highlights of their workshop happen to be, and just, look at those highlights and try to leverage them and try to somehow, maybe in a different format, but somehow incorporate them into the e-learning experience. And that's stuff that you can, as a trainer, ask the compliance professional. What worked? what did the folks respond to? And kind of part and parcel of this is, by asking them these questions, you're kind of validating the compliance person, that you are acknowledging that, hey, they have taught this subject a jillion times and they've got a workshop that works really well for them. And I think that they kind of need to hear that from the trainer. It's validation, of them. Okay, so then here's where we might get to maybe a controversial topic, but I think Jean and I are both on the same page on this. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is, if I have to say where there's two strategies where I've seen trainers fall down, it would be, number one, establishing credibility. I don't think trainers, take the time to do that, or even think that they need to do that. But then it's also this one, learn the subject matter. To help teach it, you need to know it, or at least know it a little bit. I remember talking to one instructional designer last year, I think it was, and she had a custom project for for a rabbi or for a temple, and she was delighted. She's like, I know everything there is to know now about Hebrew studies. She felt the need to learn this stuff before she could create an e-learning project out of it. And I think that pays off in spades. So we just put down some kind of common resources that are available. So there's, books, Rudder Group, LexisNexis, I Love Law 360. We just started using that here at M-Train. It's awesome. It's owned by LexisNexis. Westlaw. And this might seem overwhelming to trainers, but it shouldn't be, because your compliance folks, your lawyers, they have all this stuff.
Right.
No lawyers, no compliance team, no HR team, no legal team operates without stuff like this. These are all everyone's little outlines. I call them the cheat sheets. They tell you everything you need to know. And so those books are available. Those resources are available. Trainers just need to ask them, or even like the admins in that department, for those resources so that they can, do their homework.
I was in a situation recently, Janine, where actually a friend of mine was having a challenge with a compliance issue at work, and several of us were at a conference, and the IDs were just sort of chiming in. And I had some experience in this area. A friend of mine had some tangential experience in the area, but someone else at the table just started throwing out the most ridiculous solutions that had no bearing on the real world, and he lost his credibility with all of us. We're like, dude, really? you think a checklist is going to fix that? So you do need to sound like you know what you're talking about. Again, they're not looking to you to be using medical terminology, so don't go over yourself. Don't go way above your raising, as we say in the South. Stick within what you do know, but show them that you've done some homework. Show them that you're ready to talk about this. Most compliance topics, there's plenty of stuff that you can Google for and just see what other people have done with it. You will likely find a lot of bad PowerPoint shows, but you will likely find a lot of similarities in those shows, and you will get a sense of what everybody seems to be emphasizing, which cases everybody keeps citing, which precedents keep coming up. You will get a better sort of snapshot of what you're talking about. It also makes a better use of the SME's time if you can go in with a little bit of knowledge and they're not trying to educate you from scratch, but don't go in acting like you've been to law school either. Because that will also hurt you. Yeah.
Good point. But just to get familiar with the material, and I always like to say, it's a trade like anything else. It's certainly not rocket science. Especially with some of the resources that are available.
Yeah.
Like reading the Cliff Notes. I remember when I was a baby lawyer, probably 2 years out of law school, and one of my mentors handed me, I think it was the Rudder Guide, and I'm like, holy moly, why didn't I have this in law school? It's like it just breaks it down. It makes it so easy. It's like, there you go. There's all the checklists right there. So the other thing that I am proposing is, I really think that you get a lot of mileage if the trainer actually, after looking at the resources books and talking to the compliance professional, actually takes the first stab at drafting the e-learning script.
Yes.
Because what I see happening so often, and certainly what happens here to us, is, you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're asking your compliance partner to draft a script, and you know what? They can't do it. They're busy, they're on overload, and frankly, it's not their forte. It's not their skill.
Right.
Their skill is, looking at a script, taking that, track changes, on Word, and making a lot of comments and changing a lot of stuff. They can do till the cows come home, and they do that really well. So, leverage what they do well versus what you do well. They can't write, and I can't tell you how many times where we've been commissioned by a company to create an e-learning project for them, working with, a lot of times it's been working with the legal department, and I've heard that they have ideas and examples and they want certain things in the course, and so I'll say, okay, great, what do you have? What do you have for us? And it's like silence on the other end of the phone. So we will typically have to take the first pass at putting something down on paper. As soon as something's down on paper, then it's smooth sailing. Then they get ideas, it helps them, and then they can certainly, like I said, edit. So that's kind of where I stand on that issue. And Jane, have you done that for some of your partners? Will you actually start trying to write the script for them?
What I will find is I'll ask them to get me cases and scenarios and background information, and they will come to me with a slide deck they've created for me, or they will come to me with a slide deck they've been using as if they want me to just take it and make it be online for them. And I have a really hard time saying, I'll tell you what, let me put all this in a pile and sift through it, and let me plan out something that would be more learning focused, more of a learning event to build in your ideas, and I'll get back to you. I try to stop them, but I tend to find they want to do that anyway. So they show up with all this stuff, and they have this sort of an expectation that the 80 slides they give me is somehow how the course will finally look. So that's part of the managing expectations for me, is I'm not just going to take the stuff you hand me. I need to amass everything and sift through it and make some sense of it and get back to you. But that is kind of our procedure here, is yes. The ID and the trainer people, that's what we're here to do, not the subject. We're not asking the subject matter expert to actually create the course.
Right, but they
and then review it.
Yeah, hopefully they can review it, edit it, and then they sign off on it. It's like, okay, this is legally compliant, it's valid, you're good to go.
Right.
I would say that's their job.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so I just want to take a little break here and do some shameless promotion. So sorry about that. But let's see. Let's do this. I did want to just show our newest resource here at M-Train. So we're talking about different resources. And so one resource that M-Train's come up with, because, it came about where, we're doing custom project after custom project, and a lot of times it's not doesn't make sense for M-Train or for the customer. It's cost prohibitive. And so in those situations, it makes a whole lot more sense to basically facilitate and help the training team do it, internally. And so we have put all of our videos online onto a website that's kind of similar to kind of the images websites, Shutterstock and Getty, where people can basically use the videos into their presentations, as well as all of our courses. We've got about 25, I think, compliance courses and other courses, and all of our courses are going online too, the course outline. So this is something that folks can use to embed videos into their presentation. So I just want to kind of show you how this works here. You could create playlists. So I have a gifts playlist. So this would be kind of like for a compliance course that's kind of gifts and conflicts of interest. And I could just share that link. Copy it to the clipboard. And then I'm going to do entire and paste it there and send it out. So if folks want to just click on that link, that's just a playlist I put together of like 3 little videos. There's a main scene, and then there's a branching, response A, response B. That's something that you guys can look at. Oh. Jane, is that about enough time for everyone?
I think so. I think it's good. This is really your piece of the action. I have looked at the materials, but haven't spent a lot of time with them, so I'm depending on you to say what you need to here.
All right. And then, Melissa, would you mind just putting out a link for everyone to look at like a sample script just so they could see it too, like the interviewing restrictions script would be nice.
Sure. No
just so folks can look at it in the chat box and see the link. And that's just an example of, resources that mTrain offers, the video clips and all of our scripts to help trainers create their own customized e-learning experiences in-house. So next partnership strategy would be tell a compliance story. And so the example that I like to use is, all compliance professionals, whether they're HR folks or legal folks, they're used to thinking in terms of, oh no, this situation is going to turn into a claim, and the claim's going to go to a jury. And so you can use that to your advantage by having them think that way and say, okay, so let's pretend like this did go to a jury trial. How would you tell this story? How would you talk about these matters to a jury? How would you keep their attention? So, what would be the main points for the jury? You're asking them this as a training professional. That's your outline. They're giving you the 5 or 6 main points. It's like, okay, so if they only remembered 2 of those points, what would those 2 takeaways be? What are your golden nuggets that you want folks to walk away with? How would you get the jury to remember those ideas? So in a jury trial, trial lawyers are paying a lot of attention to how they dress, what suits they're wearing, if you're a woman, what heels or not heels you're wearing. All those things, play into the presentation. Are you using flip charts, or are you using a really snazzy, state-of-the-art media presentation? That's basically kind of, what hooks you're going to use in the e-learning program. Get them to start thinking about those. What examples or case studies, illustrate your ideas? So, what presentation tactics are you going to use in a jury trial so that your jury doesn't fall asleep on you? So those are kind of questions that you can ask as a training expert that will get them at least, down the road thinking in the way you need them to think, as opposed to just a data dump online, right?
Right.
Oh, wait, so actually before Q&A, I think I just wanted to kind of swing back, and this is part of Q&A, I guess, and answer Felicia's question there. So, I think, Felicia, if I recall, your question was, how do you kind of achieve the compliance goal while making it engaging? And I think that just kind of stating it at the outright, and Jane chime in, but I think knowing that the compliance person is primarily focused on the record and making sure that if they do get into trouble or there's some claim, they are sitting pretty as it relates to the, the printout of the training. So know that and then work within that. So then it's like, okay, that's great. How important is it to you, compliance person, to actually change behavior? And of course they're going to say it's important because that makes their job easier. There's less risk management. There's less issues. Okay, so, just get them to acknowledge that one of the goals is actually to change behavior. It's like, okay, well, so that's what I'm good at. That's my domain expertise, is to actually, change the behavior, and there's certain things we need to pay attention to in order to change that behavior. And then that brings into play, some of the things that Jane was talking about, that you need to get it from their short-term working memory to, their long-term memory, so that they can actually, retrieve that information and learn from it. Any other questions? Yeah, looks like they're...
We do have another question from Maureen Simpson. Would you integrate quizzes?
Oh yes, definitely. So, in any training activity, and Jane, this is more, maybe your province than mine, but all of our courses, we've got like all of our compliance courses, we've got a pre-assessment, And our pre-assessment really is designed to show learners what they don't know. It's not to be like a slap in the face, but just to show them that they think they know harassment, but they don't really know harassment. And then you obviously have the instruction, and then at the end of the chapter you have assess your understanding, and then you've got knowledge checks, through the course, and then certainly one at the end.
And I'm typing in chat about that. I was just saying, have a real scenario, have a real situation that a character has encountered, not just asking them to check off recall and spit data back at you or spit facts back. Ask them to work with the data to make judgments about it, to apply it to a situation, rather than just true false or a quick cover of this law says this, but that law says that. Try to make it a little more applicable. You can do quizzing a number of ways, and it's easy. The easy out is the standard multiple choice. The harder out is a real scenario with consequences for people's decisions.
Right.
And it's mostly just having to think it through. It's not, brain surgery. It's not rocket science, rocket
right.
surgery, as we say, but thinking through how the questions can be more useful, how we can help people learn. One of my pet peeves with feedback on quizzes are the quizzes that say that's wrong, try again, try again,
right.
try again. People are just guessing. If they're trying again, they're not really getting it, and that's not helping anybody. How can we craft test questions and quiz questions and scenarios with decision points that help the learner learn is, I think, the bigger question there.
Well, and then like the link that we shared in the chat box, at M-Train, we're big proponents, especially in compliance, topics, of just modeling behavior, both the bad and the good. So, we like to kind of hold up a mirror to people, show them that what happens, really every day of the week, because people are people. Maybe I'm a little
right.
bit jaded
right.
after 20-plus years of I think of myself as like the doctor for workplaces. Like when things go bad, we're called in. So we've seen folks and what they do, and people, it's just they act thoughtlessly sometimes, and it's all fun and games until it's not. And so show them a mirror and show them, here's how you're acting, and they'll all kind of acknowledge it. Yep, we do that. And then show them what happens, like take them down the line, and here's what it's going to evolve into. So FYI, have a heads up. And then we'll do, modeling behavior. It's like, okay, response A or response B, which one sounds better? So things like that I think are real helpful. At M-Train, we are kind of in the unique position that we'll often have learners, and I want to say if we want to kind of classify our learners, we tend to attract kind of the, higher kind of professional knowledge workers. And so we'll have folks, email in saying, thanks, I didn't think I was going to learn anything. This was actually helpful. I actually learned something. So, I think that's probably as much kudos as you can expect to get on a compliance course. So, I think that's what you're trying for. See, any other questions out there? All right, well, I think this is perfect timing. It's at the top of the hour. As I said, there will be an email sent out to everyone with a link to the recording as well as the materials. Let's see, also we do have here's our contact information. You'll get that in the materials. And then we've got a free 30-day trial code that everyone can use for the Center Stage Library website with all the videos and scripts, so you could take advantage of that if you like, or just peruse it. And other than that, I think that's all we have, and that brings us to the end of our presentation. Jane, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.